Just a quick video to encourage all the pastors out there, particularly those of us who pastor in a small church, which is the majority of churches. The majority of churches have less than 200 people. And in many ways, all of us are now small church pastors. It doesn't matter what size church you are, you now find yourself in the reality of having to preach online, speak online, talk to your people through the lens of a camera rather than meeting in a physical space. And I just want to encourage all of us in pastors who pastor smaller churches. Many people who have not been able to do digital in the past, have not been able to post their sermons online for lots of views or lots of listens, we can find it a real struggle, can't we, to pivot to being digital and being online. And there are some things that we're learning from our brothers and sisters in the bigger churches. But interesting to note that some of our brothers and sisters in the bigger churches are actually now having to learn how to be a small church pastor. Because where once they were speaking to an auditorium with a large crowd and they were able to feed off that large crowd, and they used communication styles that filled that large stage that they were presenting on, they're now sitting in a room very similar to you, talking to the lens of a camera very similar to you, and speaking to an audience very similar to you. It doesn't matter how many people they speak to, the people on the other end of this camera are actually sitting, perhaps watching it on a laptop, perhaps watching it in 2s or 3s, perhaps watching it on an iPad or a tablet. And some young adults are possibly even watching it on their small phone as they commute to and from work. And so I just encourage you at this time. I know it's difficult to pivot to digital, and we're all trying to learn things, and we're all trying to work out how to be a pastor of a church at this time. But don't feel inadequate as a small church just because you don't have the resources to pivot to digital in the same way that our brothers and sisters in the bigger churches do. I just want to tell you a story about a pastor where I saw him at a conference, and he filled this stage and he had this big way of presenting that filled the stage in a large venue because he had to, because he was speaking to a crowd of over 1,000. But I saw him online this week, and he's on a stage very, very small in a small room, probably very similar to how you were speaking to your congregation last weekend. So as you make this pivot from speaking in a room to being able to speak to people through digital, don't feel inadequate. Don't feel you have to get it perfect. Don't feel that you have to try and have these great editing techniques. Just do it in one take. Just speak to camera. In the same way that you speak to your audience week in, week out, you know the people sitting in the pews on your left and the people on your right. You know who are sitting in the pews in every single week. Well, just speak as though you're speaking to them. Now, you won't be able to get the feedback from them that you're possibly used to, but my encouragement to you is to stay faithful to the gospel. Stay faithful to preaching the gospel. I know the techniques look a little bit different, and none of us can answer the question when we will go back to having our people in the room with us. But just stay encouraged. Speak concisely, speak with confidence, and just have that encouragement to keep people faithful to the gospel. Challenge your audience to action. Remind them of their daily spiritual disciplines. Remind them that the Holy Spirit will gift them and grace them at this time to share the gospel. And encourage them to share things that you're doing in your church with the wider audience around them. Now, perhaps many of us aren't used to having videos that get shared around to people that aren't part of our congregation. And perhaps we're going to have to be used to that in the coming weeks. Don't think that you're going to become an overnight YouTube sensation or that your videos are going to go viral. But perhaps do expect that someone in your congregation is going to see a friend who's looking for meaning at this time, and they'll share their video with somebody else. So give a call to action in your speaking to the camera for people to use this digital time to be able to share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ with their friends who are searching for meaning. And I just encourage you that even though we see a lot of darkness around us, in John chapter 12, Jesus says that I've come to be light in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So you don't have to walk in the darkness. So I hope that's an encouragement to you, and just remind yourself at this time that it doesn't matter whether your church is big or small. All of us at the moment are small church pastors as we preach and teach the good news of Jesus Christ down the lens of a camera.